See if I can move things around. How's it going, everyone? Guess I'll wait a couple minutes, see if everyone's coming in. And keep going. Let's see. Okay, awesome. Let's see. So just moving things around a little bit. Waiting for people to come in. See, it looks like we got 22 viewers. How's everyone doing today? What's going on, squad? What's going on, gang? What's going on, crew? Today we're going to be learning about web development, specifically front-end web development. So good skills to have in case you ever are interested in programming, kind of want to dip your toes in and get a feel for what it's like. If you're interested in making websites, interested in making web apps, all that sort of fun stuff. So first, we'll talk a little bit about what is web development exactly. So web development is essentially making web apps, web applications, websites, any sort of software that you're making for use on a web browser. Nowadays, a lot of people are getting into web development by learning front-end web development. Front-end is kind of like the stuff that you see on the screen. It's the stuff that you can actually kind of interact with and fill your view with. I'm going to take a look at a website real quickly. That's to kind of get a feel for what's going on your average website. So we'll go here. So let's go here. Okay, so we're at the Google homepage right now. Everyone's favorite, world-renowned. Now we can see that when it comes to any web page, including the Google web page, including the homepage here, the landing page, there's quite a bit going on. We have just these different entities on the screen, right? Like we have these links here that we can click on. We have these buttons, this search menu that we can type in, and your search bar rather that we can type in and start looking things up with. Image here. So we have these entities here. They also have certain styling and such, right? We can see they have like the black background. This button has a certain size and dimension to it. It has an appearance, it has a styling to it. And then we can see too that when we interact with things, like if I click on this button here, if I search up MLH, and I click it, it has functionality. It's going to take me, okay, well, I don't know what happened there, but we just did a Google search. So it also has functionality. So the page has content, it has sort of structural entities, it has an appearance, it has styling, and it also has behavior and functionality. So these are sort of the three main attributes, you could say, of a web page. And when we're learning front-end web development, those are going to be our three main tools, or three main things that we want to utilize in order to build a web page, in order to build a website. So with that, we're going to learn exactly what those tools are. So first, I mentioned structure and sort of like contents, entities. That is in the domain of what we call HTML, which is a programming language of sorts. Others will argue on technicality for that, but we'll get to that in a moment. I'm going to be using VS Code, by the way. For anyone that's new to programming, VS Code is essentially a program that helps you write your code and bring your code to life, and helps you manage code projects. You can use all sorts of plugins and little things of software and functionality. So it's if you're a programmer, you want to get something like it. Here we are with VS Code. You can see that I have some files here. In fact, let's just kind of start from the top. So we're talking about HTML first. Whenever you make a new website, whenever you make any sort of file, you want to make a folder for that project, and you want to make some appropriate files. So whenever we're writing HTML, whenever we're writing the sort of the content of a site, we want an HTML file. Most home pages are called index.html. You can certainly change it, but this is just sort of standard. So that's what we'll go for. And with this, we change some stuff behind the scenes here. With an HTML file, we can have a website just with it. So I'll go ahead and show you what our HTML file looks like here. Once I get that going. Okay, so here we have our HTML. Promise you it's coming. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, here we go. Beautiful, isn't it? Blank canvas, nothing to see yet. With HTML, we can essentially add our content to the site. So say if I'm making a blog, and here's like blog, I'm gonna write blog there. You can see that I have text, right? I type in blog. In fact, let me zoom in a little bit so you guys can see what's going on a little bit better. And you can see on the web page, it reflects that. It just says the text blog. Imagine I'm going through and I want to say, maybe add some blog titles. How to learn the piano, let's say, or how to earn more money, or how to cook duck l'orange. Why not? And we can see our text appears. Now I could go and type up my articles and just have all sorts of text on the screen. In fact, I can do this. Boop, 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 boop. And this, let's see what happened. Okay. I could just absolutely fill this with text, but it doesn't look particularly meaningful. Things are not organized in a particularly nice way to kind of tell you what's going on. So one of the nice things about HTML is that we can give semantics to our content. We can give meaning to our content. So if I have a website that says blog, I can use something called an H1, which is like a header. So a lot of it is kind of synonymous with type or like newspaper or anything to do with like making Word documents, so on and so forth. All sorts of different tags that we have here. We have these different elements that help us give meaning, help us give context to the content of our web page. So here I can say I have a header that's going to kind of serve as the title of the page. And if I want to add a little paragraph here, I can add this P tag, the paragraph tag. And with that, we can see that things start to stick out a little bit more. So this kind of helps web pages, or this sort of helps web software make sense of your pages. With people are using screen readers, semantics, using these HTML semantic tags, we call them, like the header here, the paragraph tag. It just helps screen readers, it helps web crawling software, essentially make sense of what's going on in the web page. Again, it gives meaning to things. And as we go forward, we're going to see that it also gives important structure to our code, an important structure to the content of our web page with what we're doing. So HTML, honestly, it's not too crazy to get into at the very beginning. Of course, there's a big world of it, but to make viable HTML, usually people can pick it up relatively fast. And I think it's best to continue with it today by learning through immersion. So if we go through, let's see. I want to show you one more thing with this. So you can kind of see how the website was kind of plain when we just had pure HTML, right? It's not like visually very appealing, right? It's not like a real world website where there might be all sorts of colors and blocking and placement and interesting design. But HTML is sort of the backbone of websites, because remember, ultimately, for a lot of web pages, the text, they basically exist to be, to be comprehended. And text is a very, very big aspect of the web, and it's there to be read. There's kind of this fun web page that comments on a lot in terms of web development, but a simple one, I guess a more simplistic interpretation of it is that it kind of just shows you the benefits of HTML and how HTML can kind of just carry a website in and of itself in a way. So it's called this gosh darn website, which basically just goes through and says a lot of minor web development. As long as you have your HTML and everything in place, things are smooth sailing for the most part. You need that good foundation. That's what HTML can help us accomplish. This is kind of a fun one. This guy's just popping off about all sorts of web dev stuff. Anyways, again, HTML, we're going to mainly learn that by immersion for the rest of the nights. Not really too much to it for a beginner. We'll kind of see how it functions more and more. So, and two, like I think most people that are interested in programming, a lot of them have some sort of foundation with, say, HTML or CSS. There's like a lot of people get their hands dirty with it, which is a good thing. No, can't see the screen? Oh, shoot. Okay, let's see. It's Okay, so you can see the codes. You guys see it now? It should be good now. Yeah. Apologies for that. This is my first MLH stream. Super excited, but also getting the hang of things as well. So essentially, just kind of taking it back a bit for a second. I have my HTML file that I created. I did that just by doing, let's do index.html. I'm just creating a file essentially. And then you can see that if I just type in gibberish like my blog, or really just let me say my blog, do Zane's blog, you can see that I can update this so that I have, let's see. So you can see I have my content right there, right? But again, this is not how we typically do HTML. We always want to give semantic tags. So I have my header here, right? Kind of like the title of my page. Instead, what I want to do is I'll add this h1 tag. This says that this is the main title of my page. Kind of like when you write a paper in school or whatnot. This kind of tells the anything that wants to know semantically what this is functioning as. And then two, this is a little paragraph here. And so now I have proper semantics. We can see that it's kind of reflected in the page there. So with that. Okay, awesome. Looks like it's working. Perfect. Thank you, guys. Yeah, it's funny. Actually, my day job involves a lot of video chatting and this sort of software and such. Always the first time, always the first day, things go a little bit wonky. Appreciate you guys' patience with that. Okay, so again, HTML, honestly, not too crazy. Of course, there's a whole world with it, but I think we'll pick up most of it by immersion. We're going to be building some simple projects coming up soon enough, so that'll be pretty exciting. So that's the basics of HTML. Basically, it lets us add content. A lot of times it's text. It's also going to be images and such, as you'll see coming up later. But with that, we can start to introduce our next concept, sort of our next main tool. So we said that HTML gives structure and it gives meaning to things. Now, the appearance and the presentation of a web page is also a pretty big, important aspect of how a page comes together and how a page functions, how a page is utilized. Now, worst case, if you have really bad styling, let's see, I kind of go in here and mess things up a little bit. Just getting rid of some of the styling that's in this code. You can see this is a little bit more dense than what we were just looking at, but also change the styling myself too. Right? You can see that I can change the color things. I can change font sizes. I can even change the font styling. I can change all sorts of stuff. So if I go and do make these buttons, crazily big. So the styling is pretty important because even if your content makes sense, even if we strip away all of the styling, just kind of have a basic HTML site like we just saw, if you get your styling wrong, you can make things incomprehensible perceptually, right? It can be impossible for a person to practically use your website if your styling is not viable. So it's not only about aesthetics, it's also about usability and such, which we'll definitely explore today in detail. So what was I doing exactly when I was, changing colors, changing font sizes and everything? How exactly was I able to do that? What was the tool? This is where CCS comes in, or CSS, I should say. Well, CSS is a styling language, essentially. It stands for Cascading Style Sheets. We'll pick apart that name a little bit. Style sheets is essentially a set of rules. It's basically like the term that we use for a set of styling rules that we use for a website. So we saw that I had an H1 here in my HTML file. Well, first things first, let me do, actually no, it'd be link style sheet. Plus I have to do, might be a little bit more that I have to do. We'll cover this all together soon enough. Let's do link. I can do style sheet. This is driving me insane. Oh, that's why. Okay. Sorry. My tools are fighting me today. Oh, here we go. Okay, here we go. So if I do this, essentially in your HTML code, you have to set up there's a couple things you have to set up to be able to connect a CSS file to the HTML, because you can see that I have an HTML file, which again gives the structure and the content. And I have my style.css file, which is going to let us alter the appearance of things. I have to connect the style.css to the HTML file in order to get things working. So the way that we do this is, again, we'll explore this more in detail later, but I'm essentially just adding this code here that should allow this to work. So if I do, let me do a quick test. Do color red. And I go to my website here. href style. Oh, actually, my code's going a little bit wonky. There we go. Okay, perfect. So now you can see that when I made that change of color to this header element, this H1, the color of the H1 on the actual page changed as well. Now, when I go and, well, essentially this is kind of where it all starts. So you can see too that I'll add my, again, we had that little paragraph tag. If I go, this is Zane's blog. Now target this paragraph tag and do the same thing. So the way that the CSS styling declaration works, as we call it, is we have to target the specific element that we want to style. So I have this p tag here. Then we put a thing of curly braces in to sort of be our field of styling. This is where we put all of our styles for this particular element. And then every HTML element has particular characteristics that we can change the styling of. So you saw that I changed the text color with this color property here. So if I wanted to change, say, the font size so that I wanted to make this bigger, I could say font size, and then I could get a size in pixels. In fact, let me do, so I can give a font size and say pixels. it should be at 16 pixels right now. So let's say I make it bigger, 50 pixels. And then let's say I want to change the font family or change the, yeah, we should be able to do sans serif. And boom, we just changed the font. We can change the color of this too if we want to do, make it green. All sorts of stuff is possible with styling. And again, I think this sort of stuff is best if we see it in context with an actual project, which we're going to be doing in just a short amount of time. So I just want to check in on chat here, see any discussions brewing right now. Okay, sweet. So with that, now we're going to dive into CSS in a bit more detail. That's essentially the basics of how it works, but there's some interesting properties to it that really make it a strong force in terms of how we can utilize it to make our web pages just all the better. So if I go, let's do here. Okay. So we've seen CSS in action, and we saw the sort of the style sheet aspect of it, the fact that we can declare these styles here. Now, the next aspect of it that I want to go over is, well, I guess one thing before we really move on, there's a couple important things to know. So for something to show up on a web page, it's going to have some sort of styling to it. So let's say I comment out this the stylings that I have here. So I deactivate these stylings for now. We can see that we go back to here. Now, even though there's no explicit stylings that I put on this text here, right within this header here, and within this paragraph tag, they still have visual characteristics. They still have styles to them, right? This one has a larger font size than this one, for example, and it's bolded. The reason for that is that browsers actually have default stylings that they apply to HTML elements. So in most browsers, an H1 element, for example, is typically going to be a larger font size. It's going to be bold, and it's going to possibly have some like margin or padding around it, stuff that we'll cover later. And paragraph tags, for example, are usually smaller, and they have usually they're just a typical font weight, right? They're not bolded or lightened or anything. There's kind of a standard weight. And with that, we can see that, yeah, they do have visual characteristics, despite us not explicitly getting any styles, because the browser does that. The browser gives styles to these things. Now, a lot of people don't necessarily like this, because it kind of just, I mean, say you have this H1 here, and say that you want to change attributes of it, or, you know, say that you don't want it to necessarily be this big by default, or you don't want it to be bolded by default. Then you have to write extra code, right? If I wanted to come in here and I wanted to change this, and I wanted to change its size and everything, but I have to write extra code for that to undo it. Like say I just want it to be standard font weight. I don't want it to be bolded. 100, for example, or 400. I have to go in and write extra code. What a lot of people will do instead to have more control over their stylings, to sort of have a blank slate, is they'll use something called a CSS reset or CSS normalization. Essentially, this is code that someone else wrote that goes in and undoes a lot of the default browser stylings. So it's pretty simple to just kind of go and search like CSS normalize. A lot of people have their own different interpretations. In fact, we can do CSS reset. A lot of people have their own interpretations on how these CSS resets or CSS normalizations should work. Some of them just completely wipe the styling of the default browser. Others have their own default styling that are supposed to make like life a little bit easier for developers. So like this Josh Comio, how you pronounce that, my apologies. You can see that he has all these sorts of stylings that he decided upon. This is actually a pretty good blog post. There's all sorts of information as to why he chose these particular stylings. But you can see that for, well, I guess for headers, yeah. But anywho, that's the overall idea. And two, you can make your own CSS normalization if you want to. You know, if I want my H1 to have just a font weight of bold, or a font weight of like 400, which makes it not very bold, I can go ahead and do that. There's just a very, very important concept because there's all sorts of implications that come about depending on where your styling is coming from. Whether you wrote it, whether it's coming from the browser default stylings, or whether like a user goes in and does it themselves through the browser development tools, like this guy over here, you kind of see that I was coming in and changing my styles and such. So pretty important concepts with that. So another major aspect of CSS, we're still kind of on the style sheet aspect of this. We haven't gotten to the first part of its name, the cascade, but we will soon. A lot of people will work with CSS is that they'll use classes in their HTML and style based off the classes. So a class is essentially just a particular name that you can attribute to one or multiple elements. So if I say a class, let's say I call it, maybe I call this opening paragraph. And I'll just type a few more paragraphs here. If I go content paragraph, I go here, you can read all sorts of nice articles. We cover all sorts of content. So you can see that I'm splitting it up into different paragraphs here. But these ones have the same class to them. So in that way, they're going to have a relationship. Content. I don't know, let's see, cooking, music, history, all that and more. And then we can give maybe one more final little thing of text here with its own individual class. Plug, please join our email listing. I can give that a class itself. So if I go ending paragraph. Okay, so I have these three unique classes here, right? I have this opening paragraph, I have this content paragraph. You can name classes whatever you want, doesn't matter what you call them. Of course, it helps to give something that makes a little bit of sense in the context of how you're using it, which is what I did here. But classes, you can call whatever you want. HTML elements, you really can't, but these guys, we are more than able to. Well, just same thing, kind of like with the elements, right? We just give these curly braces, and then we're going to soon write some styles for them. But the difference is that you can see I have this period at the start here. That tells CSS that we are targeting a class. This is how we denote that. So for my opening paragraph and my content paragraph and my ending paragraph, let's see. Well, first, let's refresh the page. Let's see what my HTML is looking like. Just make sure that my content's there. It should be. There we go. Right. Okay, so let's say for my opening paragraph, I'll do able to do like oh, weird. Oh. Integration. Let's do, we'll underline this guy. So the opening paragraph, which is going to be that first paragraph there, because that's the class that I gave to it, it's going to be underlined, as you can see. Maybe for the content paragraphs, we'll do, what do we want to do for those guys? What other text decorations do we have? Oh, really? Here. Let's just do a color. We'll make it purple. Why not? In fact, let's do something a little bit. We do like navy. Yeah. Okay, so we can see we have a dark blue there now. So for this last one, we can do separation uppercase. Am I losing my mind here? So strange. line through. See if that works. There we go. Okay, so you can see that I'm able to target these individual elements. Right? I can target this individual one with just having a single class on there, or I can use the same class across multiple elements to be able to style things with that same, homogeneous set of styles. And again, too, I can use multiple styles for each one. I want to do font size. I want to do 20 pixels for that. If I want to do letter spacing. And so now you can see all these individual paragraphs that have the same class. They're being styled in that same way with each other. So lots of powerful implications that we'll see in full coming up soon enough. Just checking the chat here. Make sure I want to hear your guys' voices. Okay, so with that, now that we got some basics of CSS in play, we'll start to explore a little bit of the other side of CSS, just one of the more useful aspects of it. Kind of really makes it a pretty strong tool there. So if we go to cascading, let's see. So we're going to cover the aspect of cascading, which is the other aspect, the other part of the name of CSS, cascading style sheets. Right, here's our styling in our style sheet of sorts. Now the cascading aspect is essentially that say I have another styling for this content paragraph here. So say I start styling it again. Put this color here. Let's say I'm going to make the text red. Here's the problem, is that I have up here in this content paragraph, in fact, I'll just take these things away. I have it set to color navy. Here I have it set to color red. So what color is it going to be exactly? This is where the cascading aspect of CSS comes in. Cascading essentially means that there's priority to the different stylings that you have within a file. If one thing is styled on one singular element in different ways across different areas of the file, there's a system to make sure that there's always one styling that is definitively decided upon. One of those systems is, or one of the things that contributes to that system is which comes later in the code. So there's a bit more to this than what I'm going to explain at the moment, but in this situation, since this styling comes later on in the file than this one, this coloring of red is going to win first. So we can see, if we go to my website now, the content paragraph is red after I save the file. That's cascading in action. And then if I change this around, right, if I put the blue with the navy below the red, you know exactly what's going to happen. The navy beats out the red styling by factor of being further on in the file. And so now the navy applies. So there's a lot of things that contribute to this. The overall concept to sort of know of here is called specificity. So specificity is what goes on to determine which styling wins out. And there's a hierarchy to what is more valued versus what is less valued in terms of like context of styling for the same element of the same, or for the same thing being styled of the same attribute being styled of that entity. So if you want to learn more about it, definitely look up specificity. It's going to be pretty important for any CSS developer, pretty fundamental concept to understand. But again, I think that'll be best if we tackle that in terms of immersion. We kind of get our hands dirty with the project soon and see how that really works. Okay, so with that, that's our basis of CSS. We learned about the style sheet aspects, right? We can target things in our HTML and style them so we can give them a different appearance. And the cascading aspect, if there's conflicts in our styling, we have a system, or CSS has a system fundamentally in place that'll help declare and definitively decide upon which styling to take in the end. So now the last thing to really know about CSS, I would say, is more practical applications. So say you have a website, a real world website, like, we can go to the Google page, I don't see why not. Let's unmess it up for a second. So you can see that I have this perfectly nice big web page, but it's, it's pretty wide. It works on a desktop. But what if I go to a mobile and I want to use Google on my phone, in my mobile web browser? You can see that as I make the screen smaller and smaller too, if I do this, oh, maybe Google isn't the best example. Let's do maybe Reddit, something like that. So we can see we have all this cool stuff happening on screen. This is freaking out. This works nice for desktop, right? When it's all nice and big like this. But when you're on a phone, it's not as practical for things to be so large. Now the interesting thing is that you can see that as the screen gets narrower and narrower, the website starts to adapt and the stylings start to change. Like how the website is laid out starts to change. Right? It's not that, like, I don't know if like I would imagine in the older days of the internet, like when I used it when I was younger, sometimes you'd have it to where if you made the screen smaller, things wouldn't adapt in this way, right? You just get a horizontal scroll bar and you'd have to scroll over to the left and right. This is kind of annoying if you were reading an article and you wanted to read it from left to right, but you had this, but you'd have to scroll left and right. So it was not that good of a user experience. Nowadays, it's pretty standard to have this sort of adaptive styling, to have this sort of adaptive system in place. This is known as responsiveness in CSS. And responsiveness is very, very crucial to being able to make viable websites nowadays. Very, very crucial to be able to make basic stuff. Visual utility. I wonder if it work instead. Yeah, well, I would say the important thing is that you have to have a basis in HTML, CSS, JavaScript to really be able to understand newer tools. So like when I learned web development, I started with this stuff. A lot of people do. You can even see on very famous courses like and very popular courses like the Colt Steele web development course, Angela Yu's web development course, even Kevin Powell's stuff on YouTube. Those are some pretty big web dev names. And they all champion, like, learn your basic web development tools, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, because everything else is, they all work with those three tools as their basis. And that's the theme for today. We're going to focus on these more essential tools. So everything's a little bit abstract right now. It's like, who would ever make a website that, for example, let's share my screen real quick once more. It's like, who would ever make a website that looks like this, right? It's absolutely abhorrent. It's not very nice. But what we're doing is that we're focusing on these concepts in isolation so that once we build a website coming up very, very soon, in just a few minutes, we'll be able to understand why these things are working, why we're making certain decisions. Very important when you're studying any sort of skill to at least get some foundation in place so that once you tackle something a little bit more complicated, you can understand what's going on precisely. So with that, now that we have HTML in place, now that we have HTML and CSS in place, and we'll cover some aspects of responsiveness too once we build a little website in a minute. Just important to know that responsiveness is a thing. We're going to have to write additional code to make it so that our web page is more adaptive, so that it's more fluid and dynamic. We're going to see that coming up very, very soon. In fact, we're going to see that coming up right about now. So using what we've learned about HTML and CSS, we're going to use that as a basis to make a pretty simple little web page. If you guys have not heard of Front-End Mentor, Front-End Mentor is a pretty helpful little website where you can get just front-end development projects that you can recreate yourself to help develop your HTML, CSS, and JavaScript skills. So let me just show you, in fact. So again, I'm not affiliated with any of this stuff. I just really am a fan of what they have available. So essentially, you'll get these design files of like websites or little simple web apps that you can take, and it's your job to recreate these with HTML, CSS, possibly JavaScript. Very, very good way to flex your skills. And we're going to do a Front-End Mentor project right now in order to see how HTML and CSS applies to an actual project, see how it really works in the real world, so to speak. So whenever you get on Front-End Mentor and you get into a project, you can download the files. They'll give you the basic content in the HTML. They'll give you like the text. In fact, let me just show you myself. So if I go to NFT preview card, I'm going to boot up VS Code here for this project. So I downloaded this project off of Front-End Mentor. Ooh, if I can view it, there we go. Looks like this. It's kind of like a little pop-up that you'd see. It's called the NFT preview card. So it's pretty sleek design. You can definitely see it being part of a larger site. An app, a pop-up of some sorts. Yeah, CSS Tricks is definitely solid as well. So lots of good resources online. Again, best way to learn anything really is by immersion and tackling meaningful projects and taking resources from elsewhere, like stuff like on CSS Tricks or some of those other names that I mentioned earlier of web developers that have just a lot of good stuff for learning and like tips and tricks that you can apply in your own stuff. So I have this Front-End Mentor project that I downloaded. And the nice thing about Front-End Mentor is that they give you like the index.html already ready to go with the needed text and such. They give you the images that you're going to need, because with any website there also comes assets. So you're probably going to need images, you're going to need fonts, you're going to need CSS files, which we're going to make ourselves shortly, JavaScript if needed, all that sort of stuff. So you definitely need assets as well. So let's put up this web page from this code that I got from Front-End Mentor. Let's see what it looks like right now. So we can see that we have a few things going on. So picking apart the HTML at first, we can see that we have, for any HTML file, I'll kind of make another one here very quickly. Let's copy that HTML. A lot of people will use boilerplate for HTML, which is essentially, there's just some code that you basically need for it to function properly, for everything to go smoothly, for everything to work as it should. And you can use a boilerplate, which is essentially just pre-written code to get you going. Now, if you have VS Code, you can install a plugin like Emmet, where if you just type HTML, you can see that it has these Emmet abbreviations. This is a plugin that will autofill code for you, which is one of the many things that it can do. And it sets us up with this boilerplate. It gives us this basis for us to start writing HTML from. So you kind of need these tags here, like this doc type HTML, we need this HTML element. Everything's going to fit within our HTML element because the HTML element is kind of like the bare bones. It's kind of like the basis of the HTML page, you could say. Head is mainly for, you can see that we have this head tag here. So in fact, let's break this down now. We can see that we have the head, the body, and containing the head and the body is the HTML element. So the HTML element is just needed because it's our HTML file. The head is where we load a lot of metadata, and also is where people often load JavaScript files or CSS files. So in fact, we're going to do that ourselves right now. So again, just like in my project earlier, I'm going to go to link, and then I'm going to do style sheet. If it lets me. Oh, I don't know why. My VS Code is a little bit buggy. It's not letting me access everything. It's annoying. Let's do, there we go. If your code is not being nice to you, and to some of this stuff I just don't remember. Like a lot of programmers, things just are not working off the top of their head. Just can't remember certain things. I like just bringing up a file or a project where things are working right. So we'll do that here just as an example. I want to make sure that I'm doing my link correctly. So you can see here I have this link, relationship, style sheet, href, all that sort of stuff. This is the stuff we need. Here, we need this relationship as a style sheet because I'm going to be using a CSS file that I make shortly. In fact, I'm going to make this style.css. Again, you can name your CSS file anything. But here we decide to name it style.css because that's kind of standard. You'll see many different names for it, but that pops up quite a bit. That's what the href is for. It's like, okay, what are we getting? We're getting our style sheet. Where are we? What is the exact style sheet? Where are we finding it? It is this style.css file. So we have that. So the head is for the metadata. And the body is for like the actual content of the page. So that's where we're going to type all of our text. That's where we're going to put our semantic elements, like our like the ones that we saw earlier, like the headings and the paragraphs and everything of that sort. So, and then we can see that we have these like closing tags here. They tell us where these regions of semantics end. So let me go ahead and this was just a little demo to show you guys. Let me go to the actual HTML index file. They have some attribution stuff for front-end mentor. I just like getting rid of that because it's just not, it gets in the way. I don't like it. And they say themselves too that you can get rid of it. They say that in their write-ups. Always good to give credit where credit's due. So now we've linked our style sheet. So let's just try this out. I always like to try my style sheets out. So if I go background color, red, you should be able to see. Oops, in fact, let's do this. Okay. So now we're going to go live with our site. Make sure that everything is working here. Okay, so we can see that the background color is red now. Perfect. So now that I know that my CSS file is linked up, if it was not linked up correctly, then it just, the styles would not respond, right? It wouldn't work. Now that I have that in place, I'm really ready to just kind of tackle this project here. So the nice thing about front-end mentor projects is that they give you Figma files. Now, Figma is a design app that a lot of people will use for app development, app design, UI, UX stuff. I use the website here. You can see that I got this Figma file of this NFT card that we're going to be working on from Front-End Mentor. And it's nice because I can click on it. I can see the dimensions of things. I can see like the stylings on the right-hand side. I can move this. Okay. It'll tell me stylings of the exact settings and such of what to use. Sometimes it's not exactly clear cut. Sometimes it works well for the Figma file, but in the actual website, you might have to change things up a little bit. And here, yeah, so I can just see like the spacing between things, all that sort of fun stuff. And so here, once we start to build this, again, this is kind of the immersion aspect. We're going to see how a lot of this stuff comes into play. We're going to see a few new things as well, HTML and CSS. So exciting stuff. Let's just jump into it. So we see that we have a desktop and a mobile design. A lot of people, we saw how differently like the Reddit homepage, for example, looked when we were doing a smaller screen size versus a larger screen size. So if I go back to that. So people will design for different screen sizes. You might have different, because you might want to know, okay, well, if the design is responsive, how exactly is it going to change as screen sizes get smaller? So a lot of times you'll see designs for both, like say the desktop designs for the mobile, and all sorts of designs in between or at the extremes, so on and so forth. We see we also have hover states here. So this is when we like put our mouse over certain aspects of whatever it is on the web page. This is how they should respond, and this is how they should look. So we're going to start building this guy out. So just things that I notice, we have, of course, the background color. We have this box of sorts, which everything is contained within. We have this image. We have this header here. This little paragraph. We have these two elements, or these two things of text. These are really just kind of like two boxes in and of themselves. They're like two elements in and of themselves within an overall box, as we can see here. And same thing here. We have this little horizontal rule. And again, we have these two things of content, really. So a big thing to realize about everything on the web is that it really is just a box. We can use boxes to, well, that's just kind of how everything functions. So we have to use boxes, but we can construe everything as being made up of boxes. That's exactly what we're going to do today, right here, right now, in this present moment. So in terms of the easier styles to get, and really when anyone looks at this sort of project, I would say we can kind of get the easy stuff out of the way. So let's go to our CSS file, and we'll set up some colors and such. So let's see. We have our style guide here, which again, Fun and Mentor provides. So we can see that it gives us some colors here using the HSL syntax of colors. So we don't have to go into that too much, but this is just a way of denoting colors via code. So I'm going to grab all of these guys. Can I do that? No. Just moving all these over for the CSS. And then actually we could probably just do this. So boom, 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 boom. Now, cool thing about CSS is that we can actually set variables for basically anything that you can imagine. So let's see. We said that we have these colors here. And we can call these anything that we want, but I'll kind of stick to the names that they have here. So that we have this soft color blue. And the reason why we want to use these variable names, I will get to that in a little bit. But for right now, we're just going to roll with them. We have this color cyan. In fact, let's just, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have this color cyan, which is going to be this guy here. But I did to set things up. Again, we could just use these colors straight up in terms of like when we're setting the color for things. But again, I like to, let's do that. Do dark blue 1. We'll do dark blue 2. Now, this is the stuff that's not, this is not the stuff that gets you, really gets you going when it comes to web development, but very, very important to plan your projects out, make sure that you have a good architecture in terms of your styling system. Again, CSS is pretty deceptively important. If your styling is all wrong, if it's all goofy, if your page isn't functioning well, then that can kind of break, like, it can break the experience to quite a large extent. Let's see, I have, what is this guy? So we have soft blue, okay. We have cyan. We can see that these colors are popping up over here as well. I have very dark blue, very dark blue. Well, it's not dark blue. That's weird. Let's see, I have my 215, I have my, oh, that's why. Okay, I see. So I accidentally colored this twice. So really, this should be up here. And this should be up here. It's up here. It's up here. Okay. Checking on everyone in the chat for a second. Make sure I'm keeping up. Okay, cool. So back to the web page. Let's see. Where's my guy? Oh yeah, I guess I'm just working in VS Code for right now. Yeah, before you even make the page live, honestly, there's quite a lot of setup work to do. I'm getting my colors going. Because again, like within this particular design, you know, we have all these particular colors that we have to use. So we have to make sure that we have them at the ready for when we actually make our design to be able to do this, to be able to utilize these guys effectively, so that we can actually, you know, create this. So going forward with this, we have this color dark 3, and now we have this. Let's do, I guess that's, oh, weird. Man, what is going on with these colors? We have this 217, and we have this 216. Oh, VS Code's fighting me. Here we go. Okay. Now we have this guy here. So now we have these colors in place properly. Oh, man. A lot of changing around, a lot of. Oh, okay. Now, lastly, we have our color points. And again, I'll kind of talk about why we're using these variable names in a little bit, but it's nice to do this. If you put this colon roots and you do these double dashes, you can give names for these particular stylings. So whenever I want to use this color, I don't have to write this sort of arbitrary HSL 215, you know, comma, blah, blah, blah. I can just write color soft blue and I'm ready to go. A lot easier to remember. And two, there's even more benefits that we'll see a little later on. So I have that in place. I have my colors. Now I'm going to do my font sizes. So if I do font size key, I guess we can call that font size paragraph. And I can do, oops, let's make that one line. So before you saw me, I was doing different. I was like doing paragraph indents I was like doing that and doing colors or doing stylings. But you can one-line it for like little styles like this. Kind of helps make the file just a little bit nicer. So I can do font size 18 pixels here. And that should work. Why is it not? Oh, okay. This is because this is a variable. My bad. Yeah, actually, you wouldn't use curly braces here. You'd actually just do that. Actually, you just do this because we're actually not styling an element. We're kind of just giving a nickname for the style, right? So we have that in place. And then finally, we have a custom font that we're going to be using. So a lot of people will get their fonts off of Google Fonts. So let me show you this. If we go to Google Fonts and go here, we can see what font that we need in particular. We need the Outfits font. We can see that there's a URL here for it. I'll just kind of type it in manually. Get here. And now different fonts, it says that we have different weights that we have to get. So we actually have to download different font sets for each particular weight. But we're actually not going to download these fonts. Instead, we're going to host them remotely. We can use a URL to, instead of downloading font files, which is what a lot of people do, you can actually download like files of fonts that you can then include in your project and use from there, use them locally. We're going to use them just off of the Google Fonts server. Just kind of keep things a little bit simple. So we can see we have to have weights 300, 400, 600, 300. Let me make sure that. So we have 300, 400, 600. And again, because these are different font entities, really. Right, every letter needs its own styling of boldness. And as far as I understand, don't quote me on this, but these are like manually designed for each letter. So it's not like there's an overall just like bolding function that you can just run on any font. As far as I understand, at least, we have to download these guys individually, or at least, like in this case, we can just take these URLs here, or these elements here, put them in our head tag of our HTML, because again, the head tag is a lot of times for metadata and such. We should be able to do. I do this. I took those URLs that Google Fonts, or I took those elements that Google Font told me to include. And now I should have access to this outfit font with these different stylings, like the 300, 400, and 600 font weight. Now to include it into your CSS code, I'm going to use this styling here. We're going to set the font family as this outfit. A lot of times too, they recommend that you use a backup font if you aren't supplying a font yourself locally, like if you don't have a font file especially, because we aren't going to be hosting these locally. We're going to be pulling them remotely. Say that Google font just doesn't work for whatever reason. When someone loads our web page, it's just down. Well, if they don't have a font, then how are you going to display? Or the browser will have default font stuff too, but maybe it's a really bad font that the browser chooses that kind of just kills the designer or what have you. So it's good to have backup fonts, especially ones that are a little bit more native to the browser, like the sans serif here. So whenever you see people declaring font families, you'll often see that there's just not the one font typically that they want. Usually there's backup fonts and such too, like the sans serif. So I'm going to stick this in here. We are going to, I think I'm just going to put this on my body. So if I now go to our web page, in fact, let me comment this out first. Let's have our page go live. Okay, so here's our unstyled page, right? It's just kind of pure HTML without any semantics or without any CSS being applied, because we haven't set any semantics, we haven't set any CSS yet. But you can see that I just set on the body, I just set the font family, and we just saw that the font changed. So the CSS file, again, is working, and our font is working that we just included. So again, a lot of setup work, not the most exciting thing in the world. By far, I never wake up on a given day and think, oh boy, I'm going to be setting up and preparing my website files to make the development process easier. But I promise once you have this in place, it just makes things so much easier. Very, very crucial part of the process. So we're just about done setting this up. We're about to get into the actual writing of semantic HTML and styling of that HTML. So that's where the fun stuff really begins. I'll add these variables. I have this first initial style on my body. Now, the important thing too, another important thing about CSS is CSS inheritance. So you can see that all the stuff is inside the body, right? So for all the stuff inside the body, I guess we'll kind of get to that in a little bit. But basically, once we add more elements inside of the body, like once we add like say an H1 or paragraph tags and everything, if they don't have their own styling in and of themselves, they're going to get their stylings from upwards in the HTML file, right? If they're inside of the body tag, then those stylings are going to trickle down to those elements that we add, like the H1 and the paragraph tags and so on and so forth. Pretty important stuff. That's called inheritance. Some things are able to inherit just sort of natively due to default browser stylings. Other things you can't inherit right off the bat because of default browser stylings. Again, knowing your default browser stylings and looking into CSS normalization and resets and sort of understanding how all of that works is a pretty good skill to pick up, because it'll help you be cognizant of kind of how HTML CSS are behaving. So anywho, let's keep going forward with this. Let's kind of start speeding things up a little bit. So I have my fonts here. I have my font family. What else is going on? We can see that we have this background color. So I'll go ahead and set that. So on the body, I'm going to set a background color. Here we can use our variables. So the nice thing too is that it's got these little, I like that. It's got these little colors that you can inherently see. So that would be, in fact, I think, no, anyways, should be this. Let's do color. It should be that. Close these guys out. Here we go. There we go. Okay, so there where color changed. Not the right one. Looks like it should probably be background dark blue one. There we go. Okay, so now we have our background color in place. even with that, we're starting to set the stage. Now let's actually tackle this little card here. Start to put that into motion. So let's see. Checking in on you guys. Okay, cool. So with that, pull up my card. Like we can pull up this, pull the design, or here, let's do this. So we have this card here that we're gonna make. We can see that here's our body, right? The body is kind of like the whole page in a way, or at least what we have right now, right? And well, really, it is the page. It is the whole page or body. We can see that we have this card here that's separate from like the background color and everything. Well, here we have all this content that needs to be within this one card, right? It has to be segregated from the background itself. So we're definitely going to be making an element that we can put all this content in, that we can style as this one singular box. So we're going to be using an article tag. An article is essentially like a standalone piece of content that kind of works in and of itself. We could either do, yeah, I guess that works. We can make this an article tag. A lot of people might use something called a div here, and a div is sort of like a semantic list grouping element. So divs are used very, very commonly in web development. In fact, there's no real reason why you couldn't use a div here. I'm gonna be using an article just because that also feels appropriate. Could honestly go either way. So now I have this article here. Before I start styling, even I want to get my HTML in place just so that I have a grasp on things. So I have the article. I have this text here. We have to get our image in. And so for images, you also have a special HTML tag as well. We have this image tag. We have the source here, which is going to be the URL to our image, or the pathway to our image. And it should be this one here. Yeah, this image equilibrium. So I'm going to put the source in for there. Oh, why is it not weird? Oh, okay, because I have to put the images even then. Here we go. Okay. So now this should work. There we go. Okay. Alt text. Alt text is for like screen readers, or if your image doesn't load, you can give additional context as to like what should be there. I am not going to worry about that right now. Typically, you should include alt text. Or we could do, I won't get into that. This is fine for right now. So we have my image uploaded now, so we can see that we have, where's that at? Should be on my Chrome. Oh, it's right here, right? So if I go, let's do this. Right, so looks pretty ugly. We have all this small text here, and then we have this big image. We're gonna be fixing that in just a moment, once we get all of our semantic HTML written first. But we have our image in there. And now we have this little title here. Now normally something like this would be part of a larger web page. And part of the larger web page would probably have like a title for that page, right? That would probably be the H1. Now every web page needs an H1 from what I understand. So if we were to pretend that this is part of a larger site, we probably would not make this an H1. Most definitely would not make it an H1. But since this is kind of its own little standalone thing, like say someone just, I don't know, we'll make this an H1 for now. Encourage you to read up on how all this stuff works semantically. Again, no matter what you make it, I mean, it's still going to work and display right as long as you style it. But you definitely have to use proper semantics when developing a project. Super important. Works now. That works for now though. We won't get too crazy about it. Now we'll use a p tag here. So p tag, and we'll put our text in. We have here. And then here we have these two we have these two boxes here, right? We have like this little icon with this text here, and they're functioning as like one entity, right? This is one perceptual thing here. Even though in the HTML they're going to be separate. This is going to be one icon. This is going to be a thing of text. Same thing here. This is going to be an icon. This is going to be a thing of text. But we're going to group them together. We're going to put them again in one of those divs. The divs being those semanticless like grouping tags, those semanticless grouping entities, elements. So we're going to put both of these in a grid, or we're going to put both of these in their own respective divs, this and this into one div, this and this as well into one div. And I'm going to put both of these together in a singular div for styling reasons. I'll show you why that's the case in just a moment. We have this in place. So now let's do div here. We'll do this. We'll do a p tag where we put this text. Right. So we have this little entity, this grouping here. We made a div for that. Put the p. Now I'm going to put an image tag here for this. Where should it be? Oh, I can't see it. Let's do create icon. Oh, images. Gotta specify the folder as well. We do. Okay, so we have icon Ethereum. And now we should be able to check the site, see if that's working. And we can see, yes, that little image did pop up. So if we keep going, I'm just going to copy this here. I'm going to duplicate that and just take the text that's needed here. It's kind of the same setup, right? It's a div with this little rectangle, and we have this icon and we have this text here. So we'll do the same exact thing. I'll just take this text, replace this here, and then I'll get the right icon for here, which should be icon clock. Get rid of this stuff. Okay, so far so good. And we see we have that loaded in as well. Okay, again, still definitely not viable, but we're building the architecture for that to be the case. It's going to come together pretty fast. What else do we need? We're going to need a horizontal rule. Horizontal rule is just a special element that adds, adds this bar here. There's a few different ways to do this. You could use a horizontal rule. There's certainly other CSS solutions that allow you to do this. We'll stick the horizontal rule for now. We'll see if we want to change that in a second. Then similar thing here, right? We have just like these guys, we have this icon or this image icon. We have this text here, and they're working as one group. So I'm going to, I'm going to put them in one div together. So if we go to div, again, we can do image, and then we're going to again include this images. Avatar. So images, image, avatar. And then we're going to put this p tag. Creation of Jules Wyvern. So we can see that the styling contrasts here a little bit compared to this text here to this text here. But it's still part of the same overall piece of text here. So just like how we have divs, which are semanticless like groupers, a semanticless element for grouping, and you can of course style divs in and of themselves, we can do a semanticless targeting of this where we use a span element. So span elements, so divs are used for semanticless grouping. Span elements are typically used for semanticless like within an element, little changes, little targeting of whatever this content is. We have that in place. And we have our HTML written now. We have the HTML skeleton of sorts. Now that we have the HTML in place, we can start styling. So again, let me just check in on how you guys are doing in the chat. Okay, cool. Let's give these guys some classes now so that we can start to A lot of people, they like to do classes for like, they prefer doing classes over like targeting the actual elements themselves. Because like if you specifically target a class that you explicitly give to something, then it just makes it a lot less error prone in case you're like say I target a div and I target a paragraph in a div. If I make another div with another paragraph that I don't want styled those way or styled in that exact same way, well then I'm kind of right. I kind of mess things up for myself. But if I give a unique class for this div and a unique class for this paragraph tag, for example, then I can style the other div and the other paragraph tag independently. So that just helps. So if I do card, I'll give this a class of card. Again, you can really give the them any sort of name for the classes. I have class card. I can do for the H1, I'll do class. What do I want to call it? I guess just header. Header. Or paragraph tag here. We'll kind of get to that soon. What else? Let's check back in on this design, just make sure that we're doing things right. The header, we're gonna have to like color this green. We're gonna have to color this, this light gray. Actually, the light gray is, we'll come back to that. We'll probably have to do some font size stuff though. And then we're gonna have to, that image there, okay. We'll get to this stuff when we get to it. Let's just start putting things into action. So I have this in place. I'm going to make our card now, right? I have my card class, which is going to target this overall like a rectangle here. I'm going to, what's the width of this card? Looks like it is 350 pixels. So I'm going to do width, 350 pixels. And let's see what we get from there. So again, if we go back to our site here, zoom out a bit. Okay, so starting to, right, we can see that it kind of takes on dimensions here of the card. Just keep going with this. So we have 350 pixels for the width. Let's change the background color so that we can really kind of see where this card is at, how its dimensions are manifesting themselves. So if we do background color, this should probably be the lighter one, right? Not that light though. Which one is it? Let's do color backgrounds. Yeah, there we go. I think that's right. So we'll check the design. Yeah, okay, so we got that light blue background there. But as you can see, the card is not filling out in the way that we need it to exactly. So we'll tackle that in just a moment. Let's center the card first. So just a quick dirty centering, I guess you could say. It's not going to be exactly optimal in terms of real world use, but it will get things moving. Do display grid and we do place contents center. There we go. Now our card is centered here. It kind of just puts it in the center of the screen so that once I change the screen size and everything, it's still going to be centered there. And we can see that it's really not centered in the middle of the screen. We have to, in fact, I'm going to use one of those CSS resets that I talked about earlier. I'm going to take this, guys, and I'm going to copy it. And I'll kind of point out the code that helps with this. But let's do, oops, okay. Now that fixed it. The reason why is because we have this HTML element, right, our HTML, and we have the body element, which is here. They're targeted and they're given a height of 100%. So they take up the entire available screen here. So before, the height was not 100%, and it probably capped off like maybe halfway between the screen or such. This extends the height all the way down throughout the viewport, throughout the screen. So that's what allows us to center this. So with that in place now, we can see our card is starting to come together a little bit. Definitely need to do a few more things. Let's make the text a little bit easier to read. So again, I'm going to do some inheriting now with on the body here. As we said, if we style the body in a particular way, if the default browser, or if just the if we have it set up, whether we manually style it ourselves, whether the browser has that styling for a given element, we can make it so that the other elements, like that are nested within the body, will also get the body styling of these particular styling rules, which in this case is going to be the color. So if we do color, what should that be? We have, oh, cyan. Okay, definitely do not want that. It goes higher up. Yeah, that's super weird. What's that dark gray? Sometimes front-end Mentor doesn't give you the right colors either, which is a little bit annoying. Oh, soft blue maybe. Yeah, because it's not white and it's not the blue 3. So we will go to soft blue for this guy. Soft blue. Oh, that's background color. Oopsies. Color soft blue. Okay, so that's weird. Might have to change the opacity a little bit. That's kind of goofy. Let's try that. Sometimes they do that. Yeah, okay. That still works. That gets us what we need. In fact, let's try 65. Okay. That's kind of, yeah, that gets us to where we need, I would say. Okay, so let's change this header color now as well. So we'll do header. We'll do color white. Oh, okay, that's annoying. Yeah. The opacity, again, the opacity is now being taken up by everything, including the header, which should not have the opacity. So we can either, manually rewrite the opacity in the header itself, or we can work out something, I'm sure there's a better solution, but I don't want to spend too much time on this here. Now we have the header in place. We have the text in place. Let's set the font size to, so we'll do font size P that I added earlier. Font size is good for like this text here. Everything's looking good so far. We can make this a little bit better in terms of, let's think. We can see we have all this space around the card as well. So when you see that sort of space, that's where you're going to have padding. Super important thing to look up is the box model for CSS. Essentially, we have like the content of the card itself, which is like kind of all this stuff here in the center, right? And we can, so this is sort of the content of the card. What we can do, and that's all we have right here, right? That's all we have is the content. There's none of that extra space on the edges. We can add that extra space by adding padding, it's called. So if we go onto this card and we add padding here, if we do like padding, oh, what would this be? It looks like 24 pixels. Padding 24 pixels all around. There we go. So now our padding is in play. So now we can see that we do have that extra space. Card is still a little bit janky. Once we can tackle that image size in a moment. But it's starting to come together more and more. In fact, let's get rid of this. Let's just get rid of this opacity. We'll worry about that later. This looks way too dull with it right now. Okay, so we have that. Now let's do, we see that we have like these soft edges around the card here. This is very, very common in web design now. Hard edges are just a little bit too one-dimensional. So a lot of times people will use curved edges. You'll see on designs. The way that we add that is if we use something called the border radius. If we do border radius, like, I don't know, like 25% maybe. Oh, okay, never mind. Maybe more like 5%. There we go. That works a little bit better. It looks kind of weird. I think with percentages, it looks kind of strange. I think a lot of people will do it with pixels. So yeah, it looks more about right. It looks about right. So now we have those smooth edges now. So again, getting closer and closer to that. Let's see. I still want to cover some JavaScript tonight, which is kind of our last big piece of the puzzle in terms of putting together web applications. But even with this alone, I think we've gotten a pretty good taste of HTML and CSS, sort of how they work. Let's see how much more we can get done with this within the next few minutes. Then we'll take a little detour to focus on JavaScript stuff. So we have that in place. What else do we want to do? River text. Let's lay these guys out so that you can see how they're kind of stacked on top of each other right now, even though they should be like side by side. We definitely want to remedy that. So I'm going to go to my HTML. We have not given these guys classes yet, so let's give them classes so that we can target them intelligently for styling. We have this class, we'll call it ETH stats. We'll call it, with that we should be good, because we can style this stuff by styling this div here and just having those styles inherit down to these individual elements. As far as if how I'm thinking about this is right, otherwise we can just give these independent classes as well and give them independent styling if needed. But I think we should be able to do a good amount of the styling just by targeting this div here and having the styles trickle down by inheritance. We have the ETH stat, and now we have this, what do we call this? I don't even know. Date stats, I suppose. That's coming along good. And then I want to put these guys in a div for styling as well, because I want to put these, because if I just keep them like this, right, this is just one div for this, right, just put these together, and then one here, just put these together, but they really should be in an overall div, because otherwise they're just going to stack on top of each other if I don't. In fact, I'll show you that in a moment. So let's tackle this, and this. Okay. So boop, 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 and then boop, boop. And then we go, so I'll style this guy first. I'm going to say, let's do a color of my cyan at. Here we go. We have that going on. Now we'll see that the color would have updated. There we go. But I also want to lay these guys side by side, right? And the fast way to do that is display flex. Now I have them here, a little bit too close together. When you have flex applied, flex is a pretty important property for like making layouts and such, making kind of create the spatial relationships between things on the page. Very, very important property in CSS. Both Flexbox, it's called in full, Flexbox, and as well CSS Grid. So we'll do that, and then we'll do a little bit of a gap. So what is the gap? What is this saying here? Like 7 pixels or so. Not a big deal. So if we do gap 7 pixels, and again, we see our page. Oh, I'm on a small laptop right now. Not the craziest screen real estate. Well, we can see that it just updated when I added that gap. So now we have that little bit of space. Now we can do the same thing. Well, we could probably, let's see. I think this is going to be a lot of the same styling, actually. Now we put those guys side by side. Okay, this is stressing a little bit, but we'll get to that. This should also be, well, how much? This to here is about 7 also, like 7.7 it said, but this is fine for now. Just kind of going through this quickly. Let's see. So here's the card as we have it. So again, these guys are just sitting on top of each other right now. I want them to be side by side, and I want to be able to space them the way that I want to space them. So the way that we can do that is we can put them together in a div. So I'm going to take these both. I'm going to make a div. I'm going to put them inside of that div. I'm going to call this the stat group. Why not? So we'll go dot stat group. We'll also do display flex because that'll put them side by side with the ability to control them a lot more. Okay, so we got those guys side by side. And now if I do justify content, which is essentially going to let me style within the horizontal plane here. Again, make sure to definitely read up on Flexbox and CSS Grid. Once your CSS skills are, once you kind of establish a little bit of foundation with CSS skills, super, super important. If I do, what this is going to do, if I do justify content and I do space between, I believe, I'll put that stuff on the other. Right now, this guy's on the left side, this guy's on the right side. So here we have this in place. Things are coming together more and more. Let's see. Now for this horizontal rule, let's tackle this because this is not going to be like any other horizontal rule that I'm going to be using. How are horizontal rules actually? Let me see. I think that's how you do it. There we go. Okay. Wow. I'm not sure how how horizontal rules. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure how they work with their styling and such, because that looks pretty. Yeah, that is like huge. That's crazy. Look how thick that is. Even though I'm doing like 0.2 pixels. Oh, okay. Maybe something just happened with it. Let's see. We'll keep this. That works fine. And it looks like it has that sort of light blue color to it. Now this horizontal radius seems to be working as, it seems to have like a border styling. Now again, virtually every element will also have a border that you can style. So if I wanted to, let's just do this first. So color, cyan, not cyan, but soft blue. There we go. So a lot of elements you can also add a border to, like if I wanted to add this card. So I have the content in the middle, then I have the padding on the sides. Then on the outside of that padding, you also have the border. So you can see there's not a border on here on this card, but I could add a border. I could do border like 10 pixels, solid border, instead of like a dotted or a dashed line, I make it red. So you can see that I added a border now. So this is just like a pure border, this horizontal rule. At least that seems to be how it's behaving now. So I just styled the border that it sort of inherently is. We have that in place. Okay, so you can see how this is coming together, you know, and then you can put a whole web page together again just with HTML and CSS. Because remember what this looked like without any CSS. If I just take all of this away, but if I can just comment out this CSS file, and look at that. Right, this is how this looks without any CSS applied. And then if we had no, and this is too with the HTML markup and everything as well, with their browser default styles applying. So even this doesn't look that bad, but if you remember from the beginning, we just had like a white page with just, you know, text. All this text was one after another on a single line. And then with our CSS and our semantic HTML, we were able to change it into looking like this. So just with HTML and CSS, you can do a lot of powerful stuff for just making your website look professional. I mean, I know web developers where that's basically all that they do is like HTML and CSS. They don't even delve into JavaScript. I mean, that's guys that like build websites for small businesses and such in the local area. But even with that, I mean, you can see how powerful HTML and CSS is alone. The last thing we're going to be talking about tonight, I think we'll stop this right now just for time's sake. And I think you kind of get the point of how this all works now, I would imagine. terms of how we can apply it. Just get some hydration. Ooh, talking a lot. Dry my mouth out. So now that we see index.html, CSS sort of working to create a modern, sleek, viable design here, the last thing to introduce is JavaScript. JavaScript is pretty important when you're developing a web page because JavaScript, again, adds the interactability to things, it adds the behavior, it adds the sort of the functioning of things. So once more, if we go to Google over here, right, we can see that the HTML, right, we have like this this text here, we have like this image here, we have this input here, a button, text, all that sort of good stuff. So again, you can sort of imagine the HTML just being as like one little paragraph of like text, maybe this text on one, blah, blah, blah. The styling is what makes it look good, right? But in terms of actually making the web page functional, because you don't just want to be on the homepage of Google, right? That's not really the point. You want functionality because you want to use the search engine. You want to be able to feed the website data and have it act on that data once you click on the button. You want things to happen once you click on things. So again, if I type in MLH, boop, I press the enter key, or when I press either of these buttons, right, that's JavaScript at work with the buttons working based off of the information that I give the search engine. So let's talk a little bit about like what JavaScript actually is, what's possible with it, and just some of the possibilities that we can do with web development. JavaScript as applied to web development. So if I pull up, we don't even really have to start with a JavaScript file. You can actually write JavaScript in the browser. I mean, same thing too with HTML and CSS. We saw earlier how I was like messing around with Google here by using the browser dev tools. So I can come in, I can look at the HTML, right? This, as we see, here's some divs, right? Here's the body, here's the head, here's the HTML element. Once we go into some of these divs and such too, we should be able to see like here's a div. We should be able to see like paragraph tags and such too on certain web pages and the like once we go to them. And then of course you saw me edit the styling and such. I can do that within the browser dev tools here. If I do, what would that do? Blah, 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 right? So I'm just changing stuff around. I can also write JavaScript in the dev tools. We'll start there just because it's I don't know, just a nice little place to interact with it. So JavaScript, so HTML and CSS, people don't really consider those like bona fide programming languages from what I understand. HTML is a markup language. I think CSS is technically, I guess it's just style sheet. It's just style sheets, just styling language. JavaScript is an actual full-fledged programming language. You can actually, you can do all of what programming entails with JavaScript. We can start with pretty basic stuff like just to see JavaScript in action pretty quickly. Right? If I do 2+2 here in the console, which is letting me use JavaScript, boom, it's able to successfully tell us what 2+2 is. Or if I do, I mean, there's all sorts of stuff that we can do. If I do, if I say console.log, that means like I want JavaScript to like print out whatever I tell it here, or I want it to say to us, hello world. There we go. So, regurgitates that back to us. I can also do to uppercase. What am I doing wrong here? Oh, something wrong. Well, good thing is that if you, now the big thing about developers as well is from every developer that I've ever met, even guys that are super like high level developers that have absolutely crazy positions, crazy levels of skills, Googling things is a developer's best friends. Like they tell me that all the time too. reading through documentation, reading back on things that they're a little bit rusty with, or like reading or looking at old code to see how certain things are done. Like my one buddy, he uses pretty high-level abstract web development tools. So he's not writing HTML and CSS by hand like we are. Of course, he's still writing HTML and CSS in a way, but the syntax is quite a bit different. Because again, everything works off of HTML and CSS and JavaScript on the web, essentially. But we have like higher level tools now that let you work with those technologies in more sophisticated or more simple or what have you ways. He forgets how to do basic HTML and CSS stuff, like some of the most simplest things, because he just doesn't work with those and he gets rusty on them. Or two, like when I work with stuff like here, I can't remember how to do this to uppercase thing off the top of my head, usually because VS Code will do that for me automatically. Oops, let me do, there we go. VS Code will do that stuff automatically for me. So I don't remember the exact formatting of how to do it myself. So a good thing to do whenever you're trying to figure out something in HTML, CSS, JavaScript, you can go to MDM docs. This is Mozilla's, here we go, uppercase. Oh, do I have to declare it as a variable? I guess that makes sense. Hello world. That makes sense if so. No, there we go. Okay, cool. Right. So you can see that I can apply like little methods to things, right? Like I had this hello world that I printed with the console.log, and then I told it to, well, make this uppercase, and so it did. So JavaScript actually has quite a few tricks and just helpful things of functionality up its sleeve. It's actually super, super important for modern web development. Like people nowadays, they'll basically write HTML and CSS like entirely through JavaScript. And just JavaScript, you can do all sorts of crazy stuff. Definitely look into it. Definitely read up upon it. But in terms of JavaScript basics for you to know at the moment, let's see. We can kind of dive into some of that. So if I go, so depending on if you've learned any other programming language, there's some essential concepts to programming languages that are kind of just inherent to most, if not all of them. One concept is that of data types, where you have different, again, just kind of eponymously, you have different types of data that have different like methodologies and functions to how they're used and how they behave. So one of those data types are numbers, just like 1, 2, blah, blah, blah. Oops. Like these are numbers. You can see that they're highlighted in a different color from like some of the other text. You can do decimals, you can do negative numbers, all sorts of stuff. So numbers are one thing. You also have strings. Strings are like things of text. So you saw how I did hello world. Strings you have to do in like not parentheses, what are these called? Like quotation marks. You can do double quotations or single quotations, doesn't matter. Or you can also have backticks. JavaScript does have like a special function, but they ultimately do work as quotation marks for strings. You also have Booleans, which is like true or false. We'll see how that works in just a moment. And there's a couple other data types, but those are the ones that we'll focus on for right now. Let's see how those work exactly. So if I have a string, or if I said a console.log, which again is just kind of printing to us, it's printing to the console here. We can print certain things. So if we want to do, okay, well, let's print the result of 2 + 2. Right, so we're working with numbers, and we can do logic for numbers. If we want to do, so numbers have certain things that you can do to them that you can't do the strings, or that you can't do the Booleans, and vice versa the whole way around. If I try to do, like 2.to uppercase, that's not going to work because like number 2, it's not a string. We can't put it to uppercase. There's 2 uppercases only for string data types. So it's all sorts of stuff with that comes into play. Let's see how this comes together. Let's see how we can use JavaScript in a more useful way. Well, we've kind of covered the basics here. Let's instead of that, let me say let's see it in a more realistic use case. So let's do app.js. I'm going to write some JavaScript. I'm going to put it here into our file. So let's do, I'm going to put the, just like how I had to link the style.css, because right now I'm in this NFT preview card. I don't think we're going to do anything too crazy like with JavaScript as it applies to the actual sites. I'm just going to work with the console for a moment. But we do have to link up the JavaScript file. So just like how we linked up the CSS file here, we're going to link up the JavaScript. So where we do, I have just made a JavaScript file myself manually, and I called it app.js. Again, you can name it anything, but app you'll see pretty often. So I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm going to do console.log, and I'm going to do hello world, just to test if my JavaScript file is linked up to the website. We can see that it is, right? It just successfully printed hello world, what I have here. In fact, I can do this. And boom, we can see. Okay, so it's working. Okay, so let's do some stuff with JavaScript. So we talked about data types. Another pretty important thing in JavaScript are variables. Things like concepts of const versus lets. So variables in programming are kind of just like giving nicknames to certain data. So if I say my favorite number, if I say my favorite number is going to be equal to 50. So I just gave this number here, I just gave this data a nickname. I'm calling it favorite number. This is a way that you can refer to this data here. So if I do console.log favorite number, it prints it out, right? It prints out 50. Now the cool thing is that I can keep this variable here, right? This favorite number here, and I can change the value of it. And even though I don't change this code, right? I only change what's assigned to the variable. This has some pretty big implications, as we'll see later on. So we can see, right? I'm not changing this. I'm able to change this. With variables, a lot of exciting things become possible, which we'll kind of cover soon enough. Again, there's sort of two variable types to really know of as of right now. There's const, which, well, let's start with let first. So there's let, and let allows you to, again, give a variable. You can name it whatever you want. So I'll say maybe favorite word. And what is my favorite word? I've got no idea. Let's call it, let's just say pudding. Why not? So I just set it here. I said let favorite word equal pudding. But I can change the value of that. Oops. Pudding. Later on in the code, I can change the value of that. Since I use let here, let allows me to, later on in the code, change this variable's value. I can do pudding, let's say my is stargazy pie. It's my new favorite food. So again, just like in CSS earlier, like how the code cascaded, where the code later on for the same sort of attribute that I'm trying to style, the code later on is the one that wins out. Basically the same thing here in JavaScript, like the code later on in the file is going to win out. We can see that I mean, well, there's a little bit more to it than that. That's essentially what's going on here. So I let the favorite word be pudding at first, but then I overwrite it and I make it stargazy pie. So we can see that when I save this, it does set it as favorite word as pudding first, but then it's stargazy pie. And then once it's stargazy pie, it prints it out here. We should only see, oh, oops, let's do favorite word. So now it's stargazy pie. Okay, so let allows you to rewrite that. It allows you to rewrite over the variable. Const does not allow you to do that. Whenever you set const, you're stuck with that value on this variable name. So if I try to reassign this to a different value, it's not going to let me do that. You can see it yells at me because it's a constant variable. So another concept, I'm going to be building all these up. We're getting a little bit close to the end here, but I want to show off a couple little things first. We're just going to make a simple little like JavaScript app, and we're going to just apply some simple JavaScript on the page. So if I do, the last sort of thing is conditionals. That's kind of the last big thing we'll go over. Conditionals are like true, false, and or it's that sort of Boolean logic that you can utilize. So if I say if 1 is greater than 2, console.log, I'm going to say math is broken. Right, so if fundamentally, if 1 is greater than 2, then we're going to print this out. But we can say else if, right, if that is not true, if that is not the case, if we have a separate case that we want to give, else if 2 is greater than 1, or 1 is lesser than 2, we can say math works. So it's not going to print both of these. This is a conditional. If this thing is true, then this will happen. If it's not true, then it's going to go down to the next thing and see if that's true. And if that thing is true, then it'll happen. So we know that this is going to be false just because mathematically that's not the case. So this is going to skip over until it gets to something that is true, which is this portion here. So we can see that indeed math does work, thankfully. And where this gets fun is, well, let's see. This is how we can sort of swing this. If I say, well, a prompt in JavaScript, I'm just going to introduce some miscellaneous concepts here. A prompt will ask you for data, and you can type this in. I'm going to say let response equal prompt, type your favorite food, and this will actually get saved as whatever this person types in. And so if we say if prompt or if response equals, or we should put this in that if response equals stargazy pie, we can say console.log yuck. That's nasty. Or if we say else, right, if this is not the case, then we can say phew, at least it's not stargazy pie. We should be able to say stargazy pie. And then in the console, it'll print response. Oh, okay, that's weird. Why are you not working? Oh, it is breaking on me. There we go. Okay. Yeah, so there we go. Yuck, that's nasty. Stargazy pie. If you don't know what stargazy pie is, look it up. It's pretty good. But yeah, and then ultimately, like as we saw before, you can use JavaScript to add functionality to things. So if I wanted to use it, again, there's a lot more to JavaScript. JavaScript is a pretty deep subject, honestly. But if we wanted to do, so I want to add a button. That's like, and we're getting close to time here, so I'll wrap it up quickly. Let me check the chat too, because I haven't seen you guys in a minute. Oops. Oh, I got my small laptop screen. Okay, so anywho, let's see. So we'll do some JavaScript. If we do, let's say add a button here in my little thing here, button, again, button, syntax, click me to change color. change page color, we can say. And we can say that this is the class of button. Again, you can call this anything. But I can use JavaScript now to add interactivity to this button, because this button's not doing anything right now. If I go here and I try to click it, right, it has no functionality. There's nothing for it to do. So I have to add that functionality with JavaScript. We can do that by doing, again, you're gonna have to definitely do some homework on JavaScript. But if I do document query selector dot button, so that's saying I'm going to target this button that's in the HTML. It's on the page. I want to recognize it. So I'm gonna make a variable name for this, right? So I don't have to type this every time. I'm gonna give this a nickname. Let's say button equals this guy here. If I do button.addEventListener, so this is saying that if something happens to the button, I want to be able to do something. I want it to respond in a certain way. And so I'm saying that if someone clicks the button, I want something to happen. I'm going to have, let's do this actually. I'm going to change the body's color. And to do that, I also have to have JavaScript recognize the body. So since it's not a class, I don't have to add this dot here. I'm just going to do body. I can do body.style. Background color should be able to do. I think we should be able to do red. Do boop. Oh, it's not a function. Do that. Okay, it doesn't seem mad. Maybe it'll be mad at me when I click it. Again, a lot of stuff that you just have to Google because you get rusty with it. Let's see. So I'm going to go to MDN docs. I'm going to look up body styling. But let's see. MDN docs styling. I'm going to wrap it up really quick here. If I can get this. Or MDN docs JavaScript styling. Anyways, another cool person coming up. Surprised how fast 2 hours flies by. It's just pretty fun though. But you get the idea, right? We click the button and then the color changes. And then of course you can do that for all sorts of things. You can click a button and you can submit data to a website. You can click a button and you can, change the color of things, change the text content. You can post a comment, all sorts of stuff. JavaScript is a pretty powerful thing. So with that, we covered the basics of HTML, JavaScript, well, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript in that order. And we saw how to use that, all of those tools to build an actual design, actual site. So pretty fun stuff. I'm going to jump off here so that we can get the next stream coming in. But this was fun stuff. Thank you guys for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And I hope this gives you a good basis to continue to learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript with so that you can go on to build your own web apps. With that, have a good rest of you guys' day. Let's do